Most people think.
Hello and welcome to this breaking news episode of What Most People Think, and it's one of those weeks where I've got to put a timestamp on it. I'm recording this on Thursday around 10 a.m. and obviously it's been a busy week where inevitably all the focus on Peter Mandelson, Peter, the Prince of Darkness. I mean, before we get into anything, just the fact that they hired a guy who'd been sacked. I know I keep going on about it, but it does kind of link to what Labour's strategy is going to be here, where they're going to somehow try and appeal for sympathy that they were lied to by the Prince of Darkness. The Prince of fucking Darkness. Because it moved on, didn't it? You know, from us being embarrassed, appalled, infuriated by the communications, the treachery, you know, what seems to be betrayal, possibly, by Mandelson, then moving on to inevitably, why the fuck did you hire this guy? So we'll be going all through that from just quiet. I mean, look, I know I'm a politics nerd and I know I've been banging on about PMQS as the kind of like the engine room of our politics now, but my God, my wife was like, she said, I've never seen you so entranced or hypnotized by something on a screen. I was just like, fuck, this is huge, historic shit, and the sense of tension in there. So I'm going to be basically unpicking all of that, you know, not like a bit of politics, but also I'll make stupid jokes if the opportunity arises. So we'll be getting onto that. But cheers to everybody who came to the show last night in Lincoln. Colchester tonight sold out. There's still some tickets for Stockport on Saturday, not Stockport, Stockton on Saturday, and then Hexham. It kind of worked with Hexham. I negged Hexham in the last podcast, you know. I said, who do you think you are, Hexham? You know, with your fucking... I was looking at things to do in Hexham. Apparently doing scavenger hunts is quite popular there. Come on, man. What are you, fucking 9 years old? Get yourself to the Queen's Hall on Sunday night. And actually, we'll have a bit of a celebrity guest because the leader of the STB is going to be there. He said he's going to come and say hello after we name-checked him in Tuesday's episode with Dominic Frisby. So you should come down too. Piss take prices. I got one. Remember, you can email me these as well as using the hashtag piss take prices. Kazik emailed me. Anybody can email me whatmostpeoplethinkuk@gmail.com. And he was moaning about he bought a present for a colleague and it was a £70 candle from Joe Malone. I mean, this is kind of tricky, these ones, aren't they? Because I do get quite a few of these where it's almost up there with people saying, I paid nearly 20 quid for a Sauvignon Blanc. But then they say rooftop bar. You go, you know how it is with rooftop bars, right? Rooftop bars exist to fleece you. When your wife says, oh, I'd like to go up to a rooftop bar, what she's saying is, can we spend some fucking money, like unnecessarily? Can we put a premium on our night out just to feel fancy? That's why you go up there. And if you go in Joe Malone, you just got to accept that Joe Malone is overpriced and you're going to be put, although for 70 quid, Jesus Christ. I do not know what smell it would need to emit. Do you know what I mean? It would need, for me, a candle, for it to be cost 70 quid. It would need to cure cancer. Okay, new patrons. Remember, if you are a patron, you get the podcast early, ad-free, and with bonus content. And we got a few. Remember, we have just had the first of the month. So, you know, double check. If you've got a card that's expired that you use on the Patreon website, then do check. Just make sure you still keep getting this content. And another reminder that now the Radio 4 Series 2 has been announced quite soon. I'm going to be dishing out tickets for that. Oh, if you're not a Patreon as well, I mean, obviously Patreon will get priority guest list, but standing room only. They do a website. They're doing the ticketing for this. So get yourself on standing room only to get tickets. All right, new patrons are Michael Smith. I mean, that is almost a challenge to me, isn't it? Do something with that name. Michael Smith. If you were just to pull out just a standard name, that I reckon in the first ever chat GPT, right? I should say it like Boris, shouldn't I? That's why he does it. It's easier. ChatGPT. I reckon that was the first ever name generated by ChatGPT. Michael Smith. M. Smith, Michael. I don't know what you'd do with it. If I was you, I would change one of your names just to sound a bit more exciting. We had a guy at the gig last night. I offered a man in the front row the opportunity to change his first name, and he went for Manuel. So I'm going to say you should call yourself Manuel Smith, and then somebody will arrive and give you a smack on the back of the head. Richard Broadrib. That is that a cut of meat? That sounds like something that you would pay. You know those steaks where you kind of go, right, the normal steak, 25 quid, The nice one, 32 quid. But for the broad rib, you have to have two people sharing. I fucking hate those dishes where they say you've got to have two people. But why is that always the thing with paella? And I'm going to say paella because we all know that you only say paella if you're a wanker. I'm not Spanish, okay? There's two L's in it. I'm saying both L's. But yeah, two based on minimum two persons. Shit. What the fuck? Just give me a single helping of paella, bitch. Lord Ranham, I don't know if you've given me your real name, Lord of Ranham. He sounds like the Peter Mandelson of his day. You know, much easier to be a dodgy bastard back then. Oh, God. Do you think, like, the dodgy bastards now look back at that era as like some sort of golden era? Oh, the stuff you could done. You could claim expenses for a third house. You could, oh, Jesus Christ. You could have prostitutes delivered. You know, no questions asked. Oh, I'll tell you what. Being aristocracy about 100 years ago must have been fucking awesome. David, just a single namer. I'm guessing if he's keeping a low profile, maybe he's Peter Mandelson's accountant. And we've also got Andy F there. Andy F sounds a bit like those hard house DJs from the late 80s, late 90s and early noughties. Andy F going back to back with Timmy C.
What most people think.
Going to do a quick thank you and a fuck you. The thank you is to Alpine earplugs. I think they're called Alpine. There's these little silicone. Can I recommend it, right? If you stay away and you're in hotels where, let's be honest, I like to economise on hotels, but sometimes there's a noise premium and a dickhead premium that goes with that. But with this isn't sponsored content, by the way, but with Alpine, are they called Alpine earplugs? I better check. Yeah, they are called Alpine ear defenders. And these things, they're like little sort of silicone things, and you just, the way they're designed, you stick them in your ear. I swear to God, it cuts out so much noise. If you want to have a guaranteed good night's sleep, this isn't proper medical advice, but Alpine earplugs, glass of milk, a couple of paracetamol, and a shower, and maybe an act of self-pleasure. I'll tell you what, that absolute elephant tranquilizer. If you do those things, you're sleeping 8 hours solid. The fuck you is to, well, I mean, I've mentioned this before on certain social media, Instagram, but to a greater extent TikTok, which is the most female-dominated social media. Like some of the messaging coming out of young women there, like of what they think of men, what they think men should be, what they think men should do for them, the vaunted esteem they hold all women in. There's a trend, basically, that if there's a particularly beautiful woman in a clip, right? And young women like just kind of basically fawn over beautiful women all the time now. It's always been a thing that women, you know, like to admire beautiful women, but it's kind of escalated. And there's a thing in the comments section where they'll just say, no man deserves all this. Like if there's a particular, like a 10 out of 10 woman, you know, the body, the hair, the face, the outfit, they'll say, no man deserves all this. No man. I'm like, fuck, so you don't know all men. And also, you don't know what that woman's like. She might be a fucking nightmare. She might need to look that good because she is hard work. Do you know what I mean? She might be the kind of woman that just sort of goes, oh, should we get takeaway? And you go, yeah, what are you thinking? They go, I don't know. So that alone, no one is a 10 out of 10 if they act like that, right? Or just like is incredibly sociable. And then right up to the moment you're going to see your friends and family, suddenly they've got a headache and they feel ill, right? So you don't know. And secondly, it's so weird that they're prizing female beauty that highly. Because that used, you know, I remember in the 90s, it was all like, let's get away from all that. Let's not let's not judge women by their looks. But young women judge women by their looks so much, right? They don't judge them for not looking good. But there's kind of this weird implication when they do look good, they give them excessive praise. And so what I was thinking, well, you know, with men, power and wealth is the equivalent, you know, stereotypically of beauty. So what I thought is every time that I see now a video that includes like a really rich man, you know, like a sports star, Jeff Bezos of this world, I'm going to go in the comments section and go, no woman deserves all this. There isn't a woman. No, man. No, although, you know, in the case of somebody like Tiger Woods, he did think that no single woman deserved all that, and that's how he fucked up his life. All right, let's get into talking about the artist formerly known as Lord Mandelson, or Peter Mandelson, or as Starmer called him repeatedly yesterday, just Mandelson. So it's one of those PMQs, you know, comes around where it's kind of box office, because we had, you know, the emails, as I say, the photos, Mandy in his pants, but it was always going to swing around to why the hell did they hire this guy? So going into PMQs, a lot of pressure on Starmer. I mean, you know, I don't want to say I feel sorry for Keir Starmer, because look, I don't hate him. I've never hated him. He doesn't enrage. You know, some of his moral pomposity gets to me, but I don't hate him. And so I felt a little bit of sympathy when I was just thinking, as a piece of public speaking to go into with 400 people who are thinking of you let us down, and then another few hundred people opposite you that kind of going, we want to take you down. That, just pressure on a level that I couldn't really contemplate. And he's, you know, as some people noticed, his hand was shaking at times. And Kemi Badenoch, right? There's a lot of pressure on her too, right? There's a lot of pressure, but she completely delivered, I think, with subtlety and precision. And it was it must have been really hard for Starmer to take on one level. It was kind of quite lawyerly, really. There wasn't kind of, you know, Kemi tutting and rolling her eyes. It was literally like she had a job to do, and that job was to get him to say, because the thing is, the public, broadly speaking, aren't that aware of the timeline of this, because it is confusing. So her main job was to get him to say, yes, I knew that he continued to be friends with the convicted paedophile Jeffrey Epstein after he was convicted, right? What you're trying to pin on him, which is something which is very dangerous for the British public to think, is that you hired a bloke who you knew was friends with a nonce. That would be the way that I would have put it, and that's possibly why I'm not in politics. And Starmer, initially, he tried to take... Of course he would. He tried to take refuge in the process. So he started off by being furious, okay? He started off by being... Peter, no, he stopped calling him Peter. That was the interesting thing. Mandelson. He just called him Mandelson. God damn it, Mandelson. Like, you know, like one of those kind of comedy villains. God damn it, Mandelson. Mandelson is almost like a byword for somebody who's always going to let you down. And Starmer, so we would lie to again. We're going to release the papers. And he started doing that Starmer thing that he likes, which is, I'm going to take refuge in the process. This is what we're going to do. We're going to get these papers. We're going to put... No, that is not what anybody wants to hear right now. And we will get onto that. And the question is, and Kemi did well, was to just get him to say, did you know, were you aware that when you appointed him, that he continued his friendship? And eventually, and to everybody's surprise, genuinely a drop jaw moment in the Commons, Starmer answered a direct and difficult question. He got up and went, yes, I did know that. And I was like, fuck. Okay. And you could see like the MPs behind him. And it was a guy, it was kind of like, I don't know if that was the plan from Starmer and his handlers, right? Whether they'd just gone like, you know, Kemi, she'll get blown off course. Just kind of like obfuscate. And maybe I'll be sympathetic to Starmer and say maybe a shred of decency comes through. And he's going, look, I'm just going to tell the fucking truth now. And I think it's probably, you know, well, the problem is it was kind of morally right to do it. I don't know, but for it to come out in that sense of high drama, that clip will stick around and essentially more people, you know, will know about it. But that really was, it was almost like the, you can handle the truth, but like a really kind of limp beta male version.
What most people think.
So yeah, now the information is out there. So it kind of then does move onto the process. I'm going to talk about the process. There's a police investigation. And so there are probably some things that Starmer can't say about what Mandelson said to him. But Badenoch's next move was to say that, you know, we don't want the cabinet secretary conducting this, because she implied that he was impartial. And at this point, Keir Starmer tried to get back on his moral high horse, but by this point, his moral high horse is a fucking My Little Pony. It's like, no one was having it. He tried to go, look, I think she's implied the cabinet secretary might be a bit not impartial. No, you get off that little My Little Pony, okay? There's no horses for you today, Mr. Starmer. And you know, is it that unbelievable that they might be worried about the partiality of somebody that works with you day in, day out, rather than an independent body within the Commons? Because like, if you think about our most recent example of that, right, Sue Gray. Do you remember that? Fucking hell. I mean, we'll get on to like the litany of fuck-ups this Starmer government have now had later, but But, she conducted the investigation over Partygate. Now, I have no idea whether or not, maybe she did completely stay objective in that process, but it didn't help, right? And this is where a lot of where Starmer's stuff comes back to smack him on his arse, is that he then signed Sue Gray on a Bosman, essentially like sort of Celtic signing a Rangers player on a free transfer. And so the whole issue of the findings of Partygate, there was just a little filter put on them, where certainly there were questions there. And, the idea that somebody like, McSweeney, this fucking guy, man, how is he still in the job? But anyway, we'll get onto that in a sec. But the idea that Morgan McSweeney wouldn't, because the argument is there's national security here. There are things that could be embarrassing. And that's the point. He's talking about national security. I think a lot of it will be what is embarrassing. So the amount of things that you release, will they be embarrassing for Donald Trump? Maybe. Will they just be embarrassing for Keir Starmer? Because maybe he's talking to world leaders and being an absolute little bumlick. Just Manuel, Mr. Macron, just like those aviator shades. You look like Maverick out of Top Gun. And Donald Trump, how does your hair? Just such a beautiful shade of strawberry blonde. And so, who wouldn't be anxious about stuff coming out? But the question, very much at that point was, who handles that release of information? Should it be somebody within the government operation or somebody slightly outside of it? I think most people would come down slightly outside of it. And then Bainot goes on to mention McSweeney and, about his competence and his judgment. I think she said that McSweeney was a protege of Peter Mandelson, and I think that's true. I do think one of the problems with Mandelson generally is there's all these kind of there's a weird thing that men of a certain age have with New Labour. I think it was like a time they felt confident, they were buying the Enemy, they were listening to Elastica or whatever. And the idea that they could get to work with one of those guys, it's like, it must be like people, it must be like if Noel Gallagher says he wants you to remix his track. And then, so I thought when she asked him about McSweeney's competence and whether or not he should stay in the job, I thought Starmer would just back away, go, look, I'm not going to talk about people, not in frontline positions. But he went out and gave him the full-throated backing. Fucking hell. He went, Morgan McSweeney's been a central part of this government. I was like, you did not need to do that. At this point, you're going, have you actually seen politics before, Keir Starmer? Have you seen seasons 1, 2, 3, 4? Because, how that stuff kind of tends to play out. I'm a fighter, not a quitter. He's going nowhere. All of that shit. Morgan McSweeney. One just last note on this section before we move on to the debate that happened afterwards, is that Morgan McSweeney, could people stop saying that he masterminded the 2024 election, right? Maybe he did good work clearing out some of the Corbynistas. But when it came to the actual election campaign, it was a political gimme of the likes that we'd never seen before. It started with people taking the piss out of Rishi because he didn't use an umbrella, which I still think is his bacon sandwich moment. And then not coming back from D-Day. The man was never scrutinised, Keir Starmer, coming into power. People just took him to be what his allies and he said he was. And, Keir and Morgan McSweeney, he masterminded that election in the same way that my son masterminds getting one of his paintings on the fridge. Do you live in Ipswich, right? I'm just saying, on Valentine's Day, are you at that point in your relationship where you've run out of stuff to say to each other? Well, instead of actually trying to go for dinner and feeling like absolute plums and talk to each other, I am at the Ipswich Corn Exchange on next Saturday, Valentine's Day. I'm in Nottingham the following day, but that looks like it's pretty close to sold out. Earlier that week, next week, on Wednesday, I'm in Spalding, close to sold out. Loughborough, good sales, but it's a big room. So next week, Spalding, Loughborough, and Valentine's Day in Ipswich on Saturday for the lovers among you. Right, so now we move on to, I think it's called a humble question or a humble motion. It would be so funny if it had been called a humble motion. That'd just be like, when you just go for a shit and you really feel like you need one, but it doesn't deliver much. Sorry, anyway. So what it does mean is the opposition control the debate, and it's one of the benefits that the Tories still have of being the opposition for now. As Deck from Ant and Deck once famously said to Boris Johnson. Do you remember that? God, I'm sorry, I'm just going back a bit. Maybe it's because it's redolent. This whole thing has got Partygate overtones to it. But yeah, remember, I'm a Celebrity. That night, they opened with a joke about Boris Johnson. They said, the Prime Minister, for now. And I was thinking, fucking hell, Phantom Decker having a pop. Maybe the PM's in trouble. But yeah, they are the opposition. So it means that Badenoch gets to be the person that stands up and holds Starmer's feet to the flames. And then they have this humble motion. I don't know what it's called, where they control the debate. And the guy, Alex Urquhart, I don't know, Alex something, he gets up, legal guy it seems. He was good, and he also followed on the line of Badenoch, which was to be dignified. And she's actually carried that on in interviews. I think it's a really smart move to do, to not seem too hysterical, to be almost appalled, rather than infuriated, because being infuriated is performative, right? And so they're controlling the debate. And it's weird with this because he's got like one long thing that he's got to say, and then people ask for him to give way continually. Oh, that would annoy the shit out of me, that. So you go, we have spoken, yes, I will give way. I go, fucking, everybody sit down, all right? I'm going to talk and then we'll do questions. I'm not giving way fucking anyone. I'm a stand-up comedian. This is another reason why I'm not suited for politics. But he did well. And, what you could feel as this debate went on, right, is... And there was an excellent bit of framing by Badenoch. And so, look, I am giving, like, gold stars to Kemi Badenoch this week, but I just don't think she put her foot wrong, is the truth of it. The previous week, PMQs, not very good. This week, didn't put her foot wrong. And one of the bits of framing that she did was... hang about, what was it she said? She put a question to the government bench of whether or not they want to be accessories to his cover-up. It's quite loaded language, but it's a really useful bit of framing, a good question to answer. And you kind of felt them sort of turning. I mean, it was already the case in PMQs where just the looks on the faces behind Starmer were brutal in their own way. And maybe with the memory and the collective conscience not that long ago of Partygate, right, you're going to go, shit, am I going to go down with this ship, as Dido once said? And it just became clear. I don't know who the poor Labour guy was that had to stand up. I don't know, one of their identikit geezers, was it Darren Jones or fucking Peter Kyle? He was less obnoxious than those two, but he it just became clear that it wouldn't hold. And then Angela Rayner entered the chat. Dun, dun, dun. Angela Rayner entered the chat, and she had and I just thought, oh God, the North, it's their time to rise up. This is like Game of Thrones. And it did make me think of Andy Burnham, who must just be pissing himself, sitting up in the Manchester mayoral office with just like diving in to the biggest carton of popcorn you've ever seen. And, so over the course of this debate, the government's line that they were going to handle it from within the cabinet, right, the cabinet secretary, it's just not holding. I forget what, the IFC, or there's another little kind of body in the Commons that Badenoch was suggesting that they defer to. And you just sort of thought, God, like, when you talk about a leader, what is a leader? On a simple level, it's people having trust in somebody's kind of ethics and their judgment. Judgment is a huge thing here, but just also whether or not a party does what they're told, right? To lead means we will defer to you. I mean, I know it all sounds like blindingly simple, but at every turn with this Labour Party, right? And maybe it's a consequence of how Starmer got to power and how he routed the left. At every time, they seem to give him a kick up the arse on his way out of the door. So now we are going to have the IFC or the ICC, International Cricket Committee. I don't know. The IOC, I don't know. They're going to investigate this. But the problem for Starmer is that leaves stuff hanging. And there is a police investigation now, so those take time. So it just means that this will stick around in the public psyche. And some of that might be that the public jump to conclusions about what has happened here that are beyond what has happened. But let's be honest, that's just kind of what happens. If you look at Partygate, I'd imagine at the time, the vast majority of the public felt that a number of sitting MPs and cabinet ministers were the ones that were partying at number 10, right? Even though it was almost exclusively civil servants, right? The things that Boris and Rishi were done for were to do with cake. Now, I'm not saying like that doesn't absolve Boris for his overseeing of that culture, or blind eyes that were turned, but the way it went down was it was a collective plague upon your house, essentially. And that is sort of what's going to happen here. And, I'll say again, the simple devastating thing for Starmer is that the public are now fully aware that him and McSweeney, they gave a job to a guy who stayed friends with a nonce. And, you know, if you look at... I don't think this will be what does for him, by the way. I sort of don't. I don't know why my political waters aren't sensing a kind of mutiny here. But it just goes onto a list, doesn't it? I mean, Louise Hay, you know, he's talking about, you know, lawmakers can't be lawbreakers. And he hired Louise Hay, Tulip Sadiq, you know, he's getting done for corruption. You know, there's so many judgment issues, Freebie Gate, the U-turn on welfare, which is, for me, one of the biggest... strategic errors of this government. It was such an important thing to take on. They fucking fumbled it, and now look, you know, where we're going economically. The winter fuel U-turn, Chagos, how the budget was handled. They got told off for that. It's just so much stuff. And, you know, man, just it kind of stinks politically with Mandelson. Let's be honest, he's been indulged way too long, this man. Not just by the political class, but in the media world. He was indulged too long. But if you're the Prime Minister, the responsibility to do the right thing is greater. I don't understand how people don't understand that. When they say, well, you know, he got an interview there or he was on a podcast there. Yeah, all of that stuff is you know, things to be considered. But I would say that being the Prime Minister and giving him a job, that's really where the scrutiny mostly falls. And it's so bad for Starmer's brand because, you know, with Boris Johnson, he comes in. The problem with him with the volume of lying, it was almost like it was factored in, you know, the old would lie a bit, right? But Starmer, he was the new sheriff in town, wasn't he? I mean, I don't want to use a Star Wars prequel analogy here, but it just makes me think of Obi-Wan talking to Anakin. You were the chosen one, Anakin. You were supposed to destroy the Sith, not join them. And that is how the public will perceive it. You know, it takes a long time for information to filter down to the public, but once an idea or a story beds in, then it's probably the beginning of the end, really. And you know, you just got to look at what happens next. You know, does he lose the Gorton and Denton by-election? I don't know. I don't know if that's clear-cut, to be honest. That might give him a reprieve. Just there might be a desire to keep reform out, but it looks like he will lose Wales, will lose Scotland, will lose the local elections in May. And at that point, you know, his party might just conclude that he is a loser. Okay, what do you think? Did I get that right? Let me know in the Patreon section and comments. Always keep an eye on the debates that happen there. If you want to email me, whatmostpeoplethinkuk@gmail.com. I pick them up every so often, but Patreon is more immediate. And also, do you like this podcast? Then please give it a like, 5-star rating, and subscribe. There are still loads of people who evidently Google it every so often. Oh yeah, I like that podcast. No, every week I'm doing shows, pretty much most weeks I'm doing 2 shows a week, and there's so much happening politically. You want to be a part of this. I do love doing this show, and we want the audience to grow. So yeah, there will be another show next week, another main show. I think Keir Starmer will still be the Prime Minister, but who fucking knows, man. Listen, have a great weekend.